Hey Gear Seekers, I'm Nick. In our Antec C3 video that we released a couple of weeks ago, one of the most repeated comments I saw was, what about the Antec C5? In fact, Antec emailed me and they're like, hey, we read the comments and everyone wanted to see the C5, so we're going to send it to you. So that's what we've got here today, ladies and gents. We're going to take a closer look at the brand new Antec C5. Claire, how many times did I say Antec C5? It's been a couple, right? Like at least 4?
69.
69 times. Okay, so yeah, let's rip it apart, test the thermals, and then I'll let you guys know if this new Antec C5 is worth your hard-earned money. Let's do a case review thing. That could be fun.
Okie dokie.
Okie dokie.
Okie dokie.
This video is brought to you by VIPSCDkey.com. Have you ever installed Windows 11 only to see the watermark of death? You don't need to fork out a couple of $100s for a key. You can grab one from today's video sponsor, from VIPSCDkey.com for 1/10 of the price. You can use our code GEAR to get 30% off for this month only. How good is that? That takes that already cheap Windows 11 key and makes it even cheaper. It's easy as placing your order. Bingo bango. You've got your new key on your orders page. You chuck that key into the activation screen and you're good to go. No more watermark of death. Use code GEAR to get 30% off for this month only. Link in the description. On with the video. Back to you, Nick.
Let's start off with panel removal. On the edge of the TG panel, there's 2 thumb screws. They're not captive thumb screws. Basically, you just want to remove those 2 screws and then you slide the side panel backwards. And don't roll away from me, screw! No! To remove the rear panel, there's 2 more thumb screws. These are also not captive thumb screws. Just remove them and then slide the panel back. You'll also notice that this panel here has vents on it, so you can use that for intake mostly, not exhaust. Front panel removal is similar to what you'll find on a non-fish tank case. There's like a handle under the front edge and you want to pull it, but what I would recommend doing is not that at all. I would just kind of pull it from the edges of the glass because the gap here is quite small and it can be a little bit hard, especially if you've got chunky little chorizos like mine. And yeah, just grab it from the sides, it's a bit easier, and it does the same thing. And then you can pull this panel away. It's got a little RGB strip built into it, which I'll show you guys shortly. There's 2 magnetic dust filters with the C5. There's one that sticks to the top of the case, and there's a magnetic dust filter on the bottom, underneath on the undercarriage, right there at the bottom. Underneath. Time for everyone's favorite scientific fish tank case test, the flex test. Now I can already tell you that the C5 does not flex. I'm putting a shitload, oh, I just bent it. Yeah, I think I pushed it too hard. But yeah, you get it. There's not any flex, but there is a point where you probably push too hard and damage the case, which I just did. Yay! I'm an idiot. I actually pushed that way too hard that I bent the panel out. Oh my God, Nick, what have you done? I mean, it's so strong that it bent this part of the case. I could probably fix that. There we go. So yeah, this is flex test approved, but not fat Nick pushing down on the panel hard approved, because nothing's ever gonna stop that from collapsing. The moral of the story is if you're gonna do a flex test, which you don't need to do because I've already done it, don't push too hard because yeah, nothing is infinitely strong, but this is still very, very strong. Like better than Corsair. I think it's pretty easy to beat Corsair at the flex test at this point in time. And Fantech's flex test was a bit of a fail too. So it looks like Antec is winning the flex test wars so far. At Computex, I'm going to flex test everything. Hopefully we don't break anything. As far as power supply support, the C5 supports a power supply up to 240 mils in length. Side panel, as well as at the side panel that we removed before, you can see that it has vents for intake because this is a dual chamber case. The power supply is on this side of the motherboard tray. It goes right here, like in and out. For SSD and hard disk support, it's got this removable bracket on the back side of the case here. Requires 4 screws to be removed to get it out, but essentially on this bracket here, we can do 2 2.5-inch drives, one here, and then a 3.5-inch spinning rush drive on the other side of this bracket. 2 2.5-inch drives here, flip it over, and 3.5-inch spinning rust on the other side. So the C5 has 7 included fans. You heard that right? 7 fans. These are all addressable RGB fans. They're all PWM as well. There's also an RGB hub, which we'll come back to in a moment too, but the ones on the side here are Antec. These are reverse pitch fans, right? They're designed to look like they're exhaust, but they're all Antec. The bottom of the C5 also has 3 more 120mm fans. They're also reverse pitch, also addressable RGB. So that's 6 fans. Then we've got lucky number 7 on the back, which is exhaust. So look at that, guys. We counted to 7 together. Yay! Full fan and radiator support. Up the top, we can do up to a 360mm liquid cooler or even a 280mm if that's what you really wanted to do. As well as that, you can do either 2 140mm fans or 3 120mm fans. The side is slightly different to the top, and that's basically because of height constraints. So as you can see here, you can do 3 120mm fans or you can do 2 140mm fans, but for radiator support, the maximum supported size is 280mm. Not 360. And it makes sense because if you look closely at the top, the end tanks for radiators are typically a fair bit taller than 3 120mm fans. So, you know, that gap there is nowhere near big enough for that, but that's okay. On the bottom, you can do 3 120mm fans. There aren't mounts for 140s, unfortunately, so it's not exactly the same as the top of the case here. So 3 120s is the max. Yes, that is my coffee cup over here, and yes, I am tired. And lastly, a single 120mm fan mounting point at the back of the case. So motherboard support is where the C5 gets very, very interesting. Now, the keen eye out there would have already spotted this, but there's cutouts for motherboards with back connectors. So ASUS BTF boards, as well as MSI Project Zero boards will all work in this case. And on top of that, it will also support MATX back connector boards because they've got the cutouts down here as well. So good work, Antec, for doing something that I complained about with a bunch of other cases that have back connector support. A lot of them don't have MATX board support because sometimes, especially in cases like the C5, putting an MATX board in here isn't outrageous because if you look at the height of where the bottom fans are, the motherboard would stop about here and it actually looks really nice at that height. In terms of size for regular boards, which is probably what you're going to see people using, you've got support for ITX up to ATX, and you'll notice that there is more than adequate cable management spaces for everything in this case. I also just quickly ripped out our MATX MSI Project Zero board just to show you what it would look like with the board installed. And back connector support is fantastic with the C5. And just quickly as well, I'll just zoom out a little so you guys can get a little bit of perspective as to what I was meaning, right? So with this board here, with the C5 and the fans on the bottom, you can see that the gap here is quite small anyway. So an MATX motherboard in a case like this is not out of the question. To be honest, this case just really isn't that big at all. It's kind of the perfect size if I'm being honest. As for air cooling in the Antec C5, it supports a maximum CPU cooler height of 160mm. And I actually think people are gonna have a bit of an issue with this because 160mm is kind of pushing it for really, really big air coolers. But at the same time, guys, get a liquid cooler and liquid cool in here. I know people love to air cool things, but with these fish tanks, they just look better with a liquid cooler. So just do that. Don't worry about it. For GPU support in the Antec C5, you've got a maximum supported length of up to 410mm. Now, something I wanted to address in this video that I said in the C3 video, which wasn't correct, was these cases do support vertical GPU placement, even though the back has the supporting braces across the slots because, now this is a big because caveat, Antec's own vertical GPU bracket will allow you to install them with the rear brackets on here, right? Does that make sense? So the way that they do it is they allow you to shift where exactly the GPU sits and it still uses the same mounting holes to mount to the case. And yeah, so that's a correction that I would like to make because sometimes I would say something and it's not correct, but in saying that, technically it is correct because you can only use one vertical GPU bracket and that's the Antec one. I guess it's by design. For case wiring, we've got our USB Type-C front panel cable, USB Type-A, front panel audio, and all the connectors for all your lights and all your switches and all that jazz. On the front panel, we've got a power button, a power light, a disk activity light, a switch, so you can control all the RGB that's included, a USB Type-A port, a headphone jack, a microphone jack, another USB Type-A port, and a USB Type-C port. Look, it even has the label, Type-C. And you know where we're going soon, Claire? From Type-C to Type-A. Type-A. The C5 has an integrated RGB controller and an 8-port PWM fan hub. So this is fully populated from factory because I've unplugged the connector for the front panel RGB, but you can see here there's 8 for addressable RGB, there's 8 PWM fan connectors, there is a spare one on the hub as well. Now, if you don't want to use the included fans for some reason, you can use this for your own fans for addressable RGB. To power the hub, you're going to need some SATA power. There's also 3-pin 5-volt addressable RGB pass-through from your motherboard and PWM fan control from your motherboard as well. But I'm going to show you how it looks because you want to see, right? I want to see it. Like I mentioned before, there's a button on top of the case that we can use to change the effects. And Antec typically has some pretty nice effects with their controllers included. So there's a lot of different combinations here. And the lighting for all the fans is all hooked up and all that jazz. So you can see how this works. Pretty standard for an integrated RGB controller, but it is nice that it's there because it's one less thing you need to worry about, especially with software. Like for me, for instance, I don't really care about RGB software that much, and it can be a bit of a pain in the ass half the time, but yeah, it's good to have a nice integrated solution like this. And I think it's fine. Like, what else can I say about it? It's got more than enough effects to satisfy most people. As well as that, just looking at that front RGB strip, yeah, it's pretty nice and diffused. It's not terrible at all. I kind of like these subtle RGB effects on cases. They look really nice. You can probably hear the fans are running at 100% right now because there's no PWM control hooked up. That's everything I think you need to know about the Antec C5 for now, but let's do our usual thing. Let's test our thermals and let's do a build thing. All right, let's take a look at the thermals with the Antec C5. What you're seeing on your screen right now is the thermals are really good for this case, but there's no surprise to that at all, considering it's got 7 fans included with the case, which is absolutely absurd. So yeah, like there's not really that much to report here. The only interesting thing I would say is that the filters added a little bit of restriction, but usually when it comes to using a top filter for cases like this, I would say get rid of it. Also, I think the top filter would probably fit on the back panel if you really wanted to still have some filtration there. So there probably is that option, but to be honest, I didn't test it, but maybe you'll do it in your own C5 build. I don't know. If you're interested in any of the hardware used in this build, there's a PCPartPicker list down below in the description. Check that out and you can see everything. Or there's little cards around all of the stuff when it's happening on your screen to tell you what all the hardware is. Okay, Antec C5. Well, I gotta be honest with you guys here. I wasn't expecting this case to be as nice as it is. The build quality is really, really good. The cable management, as you can see right here, is pretty good. Remember, dual chamber case, you've got plenty of room, and just do what I do. Just jam everything in the back, have some fun, and don't ever look at it ever again. Overall, this case was really easy to build in. I had no problems with anything in this case. The only thing I would say is if you're using the fans that come with it, rewire everything, because the factory cable management from Antec is really average. And I basically gutted everything cable-wise, replugged it in, made it nice and clean, just to hide the cables a little bit better, because I did use a Project Zero motherboard and I wanted to hide as much as possible. Unfortunately, with Project Zero and the MSI hardware, they don't have power for their GPUs directly on the motherboard. We have to live with having this really ugly 12-volt high power cable, you know. Luckily, it is a custom sleeved cable mod cable that doesn't look terrible, but yeah. I have nothing really to say about this case other than this is easily one of my favorite dual chamber fish tank cases I've seen. Couple of reasons. First of all, I've got an M-ATX board in here and it doesn't look like it's too small for this case, which is nice. The fact that it supports these back connector motherboards from the jump is really, really nice too. And it supports the M-ATX ones, which is something that we've seen missing from quite a few cases with this back connector compatibility lately. So good job, Antec. I think you guys absolutely nailed the C5. Yeah, I really have nothing bad to say about this case at all. It's probably one of the best Antec cases we've seen in years. Easily. It's easily better than the C3, and it's easily better than the C8. Well, at least in my opinion, the C8 is pretty big, but the C5 is just right in that sweet spot. It's not too big. Yeah, it's a fish tank. Yeah, we've seen a million fish tanks, but this is one of the better looking ones. Definitely worth a check out. Now guys, if you're interested in the Antec C5 with its 1 billion pre-installed fans, you're looking at around about 160 Aussie dollars, or around about 130 US dollars at the time of filming this video. And if I'm being absolutely honest here, you're getting 7 fans and an RGB controller, and the fans aren't terrible for that money, and I think that is pretty damn excellent value. This is definitely one of Antec's best cases they've made in years, and I keep saying it about Antec. They keep upping the game and the quality with their cases, and they've been killing it for the last couple years. So Antec, if you watch this video, good work guys. Honestly, you guys are killing it. Maybe Antec's gonna make the comeback and be #1 again like they used to be back in the day. Everybody remembers the Antec Sonata, or if you're too young, Antec used to be #1 in the case game before all of these other companies. So it would be interesting to see what Antec has at Computex this year. We'll be visiting Antec to see what they've got. So make sure you're subscribed and you tune in for our Computex 2024 coverage coming very, very soon. You know, it's right next to Type C, Claire, in Type A.
Can't wait.
I made that joke earlier in the video. Also, I wanted to add while we're here, I've been slowly filming this video over 3 days, so there's 3 outfits in this video. I've just been busy doing like life stuff, and it was the weekend, so I was like, you know what, we'll just give it a go. And if you like the music you heard here, I make all the music. It's available by clicking that join button right down there down below. And if you want to get early access to videos kind of like this one, we're over on Floatplane. There's a link to that in the description as well. Once again, thank you so very much for watching. I'm your boy Nick with Gear Seekers. You peek, we seek, and yeah, Antec C5 absolutely nailed it. And it's good sometimes for me to take a couple days to make these videos and really think about how I feel about cases like this, because when I built in this, which was yesterday, I had no problems with it. I just cruised through, everything just fit perfectly. And I can't say that for a lot of other cases out there. This is just an absolute pleasure to build in. I got nothing bad to say about it. I think you guys are gonna like it. I like it, and yeah, you guys are definitely gonna like this one.